electronic devices, including mobile phones, should be switched off or into silence. And would like to ask that members of the public who've joined us in the room today to not interfere in the proceedings. And as soon as the hearing is closed, please leave quietly. And we'll begin with the introductions. So my name is Deputy Hilary Jeune, and I'm the Chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel.
I'm Deputy David Wall, panel member.
Constable David Johnson, also panel member.
Constable Andy Joe, Minister for Infrastructure.
John Littlewood, Head of Technical Support Services Projects for Ops and Transport.
Tristan Dodd, Associate Director, Highways Transport Infrastructure.
Tim Daniels, Director of Property Holdings.
So thank you. And Minister, we have 2 hours for this hearing, and we've got a lot of questions to get through. And I'll start around some questions related to the upcoming potential budget and funding for 2026. So the panel understands that there's no new departmental business plan to be published for 2026. Could you therefore clarify which outstanding objectives for your 2025 business plan the department intends to carry forward and implement in 2026?
So work continues. Clearly, it's a challenge for us in terms of the budget, as it is for all departments. Rising costs makes life very difficult. We've got some £90 million worth of expenditure planned for next year. So we are working hard, as we've discussed in the past, on ensuring we've got drainage for new properties and for existing properties to join on. So that work is underway. Our roads programme will continue. And really, a lot of it is business as usual. So that's where our priorities are in terms of business as usual. We've got other work that we're exploring, and clearly Fort Region is a key part of our remit. So that's a significant investment for us.
So, for example, when we're looking at the business departmental plan, the car parking plan, is there, will you be developing a new car parking plan?
Yeah, so the team are working hard on the car parking plan, both on our existing estate and potential for additional car parking. Both myself and my assistant minister firmly believe that we need to provide additional parking for the parish of St Helier for people who are either resident or visiting the parish. It's identifying a site and then going through planning for that. So work continues on that. We've done a lot of work identifying the changes in car park requirements. So with the introduction of electric vehicles, that brings us two challenges. Weight is one challenge, and fire is another challenge. But the team have done a huge amount of work on that. We've invested significantly this year in refurbishing Pierre Road car park, and the team continues to work hard in that area.
So when will we see this plan, and will that then include this potential new car park? Are we seeing that before the end of the political term?
I think in terms of the plan, because it's always about site acquisition, so publishing the plan leaves you a fortune to hostage. There will be ransom strips, but we're looking at developments and developers that we can work with to try and redistribute parking. We think that the parking needs to be around the ring road to reduce the amount of through traffic through town, and also for convenience, but also there are areas of St Helier which are underserved by parking, and so we'd look to redress that. And then there are other key opportunity sites such as the waterfront development, which in order to unlock the International Finance Centre also need to provide 500 parking spaces. And it's how do you do that without creating gridlock on some of the key junctions around that. And so there are proposals in train for that, but they do rely on land acquisition.
Yeah, can I just, talking about car parking spaces, one of the issues around that, which I have a real bugbear about, is the Esplanade. Right now, it's a building site, and it's owned by the JDC, which is an ALO. Why are we not forcing the JDC to use that as a car park in the meantime? to coin a phrase.
So we don't have any control over the State of Jersey Development Company. They report to the Treasury Minister.
Okay.
So we have seen vehicles parking in the Esplanade in recent times.
Sure.
And there's a number of sites around St Helier that we would be quite keen to see utilised.
But this is a quick win.
Well, it can be seen as a quick win, but it's about what are the unintended consequences. So it's about working with our partners to get to where we want to get to.
Okay.
And just to add to the Minister's points there, we are in dialogue with the Jersey Development Company. They need laydown areas for their various construction phases, but they have spoken to us about how that would work and how they preserve the 500 spaces that are on that site at the moment, within the area, because we've got the Jardin. And so there's been no reduction in capacity around there. In fact, there's been an increase, you could argue, because there's some parking underneath some of the new buildings there, etc. And you've got the waterfront car park, and also the.
But it's not so much about reduction.
Car park is available.
But it's not so much about
use as well.
reduction, is it? It's about location. Location. Where these parking spaces are is more critical than actually how many there are.
At present, though, we generally have capacity in our existing car park stock at Pier Road, at Sand Street, at Patriotic Street. Obviously, there are peak demand times of the year, such as Christmas, where the infrastructure does struggle to meet demand. But I mean, that's always an issue with the efficient provision of transport infrastructure. Is those peak times, how much overcapacity do you carry, which isn't required the rest of the year?
So in that, just moving on from that, with the Minister, you're saying that you and the Assistant Minister feel that there needs to be a new car park in town. Is that more than for residents rather than for commuters?
Combination. I think we're very keen to get people to use the buses and/or active transport, but I think you've got to give people choice. So, speaking personally, I don't cycle as often as I should, but I do get the bus quite frequently. But I drive more regularly than I perhaps should.
But the Director of Transport just said that there is capacity in the current car parks. So.
Well, we've got, if you look at the development that's happening in and around St Helier, there's significant development taking place. So we need to look forward rather than thinking we've got enough capacity for what we've got today. There are hundreds of apartments
So it
and
will be
homes
more
being
residential.
built at the moment. And so therefore we need to make sure that we continue to grow and not constrain people. We need to give people choice.
Could I just add a little bit to that? In terms of the long-term planning that we're undertaking under the Minister's direction, what we have to look at is actually, at some point, we're going to have to retire car parks. A lot of the structure, we can keep them going, but they become increasingly less fit for purpose. And many of the car parks are coming up to their 60th birthday, and they won't go on forever. So what we need to look at is where the parking needs would be in the future. The north of town is one area which doesn't have a lot of public parking available, so it's a redistribution of the parking. It's making sure it's on the ring road, but at the same time trying to produce that additional capacity so you could retire, repurpose or reconstruct other car parking sites that we already have. And so that's got to be tied into it.
Okay, thank you. Moving on. Now that the 2026 budget has been published, can you set out the full list of projects your department intends to deliver in 2026?
I can share that list with you.
Yeah,
We've mentioned some of the work we're doing on drainage. You can go online and see our highways maintenance for the next 5 years. So we've published that. I think 6 years are published at the moment. So you can see where we intend to do works. Certainly on the highway, we can share that list with you, but I don't have a list in front of me this morning.
Is there any work streams that were previously scheduled for 2026 that has now been deferred or withdrawn?
No, I think the key challenge for us was around the drainage because houses are coming out of the ground, literally coming out of the ground, and we need to make sure that we can put those houses online as soon as they're completed rather than wait for the drainage infrastructure to be in place. So I'm confident that we can deliver that in all the areas we are charged with doing.
And the budget sets out overall government savings targets, but does not identify specific savings for infrastructure. Can you clarify whether your department is expected to deliver savings under this budget? And if so, what form would those take?
Well, we are expected to deliver savings just like every other part of the organisation. I'm pleased to say that in the last 18 months, we've reduced our reliance on external consultants significantly. We've got some very talented people in and around the department, and I think I've spoken about that in this forum before. But for example, when we need an independent road safety audit, we can't do that ourselves because it wouldn't be very independent. So we have a reliance on some consultants. When we're doing work on our energy from waste plants, there are times when we need to bring in specialists because we only do something once a year, so people aren't specialists in that function, although we have some very capable people in that area. So we will still need to use external resource, but our reliance on that is heavily being reduced, and we continue to look for efficiencies. So, for example, one thing that I get quite upset about is the fact that we spend in the region of £200,000 a year on what are called banksmen. So people who have to stand at the junction of roadworks because the public ignore signs that say road closed or no through road. If you ignore a road closed sign, you are liable to a fine of up to, I think it's £1,000.
I can't remember, it's a heavy fine.
Significant fine, but I can't remember the last time anybody was fined for ignoring a road closed sign. And I'd much prefer us have those junctions policed and a couple of fines issued so that we re-educate the public, and we could spend that £200,000 on tarmac rather than on people. But that's an example of where we could be more efficient, but safety of the public and our staff and our contractors is the priority. So
have you got a piece of work that goes through that where you've identified an example for us, but it's a kind of more of a detailed piece of work?
The team are constantly looking at where we can make efficiencies, and I think it's almost like a death by 1,000 cuts, particularly within infrastructure and other departments. But infrastructure have been under pressure for a long time, and that's we can see that in the investment we need to make within infrastructure because we haven't made the investment. A lot of our costs are not staff costs, so we spend more money on non-staff items than we do on staff items, and therefore when we see inflation increasing and we're only getting an RPI increase in allowances, there becomes a wider gap. So the team are well versed in becoming efficient and ensuring they deliver what they can. So that's why the priority is on safety and legal requirements. So, for example, within property holdings, we have to do electrical testing, we have to do Legionalis testing. Those are legal requirements. So those requirements are at the front of the queue. Fire safety is at the front of the queue. And there's lots of things we'd like to do that we can't do because we have to prioritise.
And I think moving on then from that, we know that part of the budget there's going to be presents in investing in Jersey programme and also this capital investment fund. At the moment it says in the budget it will be only included in principle, and then its establishment will depend on a further proposition to be brought to the States Assembly once the budget's been approved. But could you Minister, explain a bit of your understanding of how this process will work in practice, how to set it up and how it will be administered in past?
I think it doesn't matter who's in the State Assembly or in government. We need to look much further ahead as an island in terms of what are the island's requirements. And so we've got a lot of our estate we've just heard of car parks that are 60 years old. They don't last forever, although they appear to last longer than some of our structures. So we've got to think forward. As regulations changed, some of our buildings aren't fit for purpose. We're sat in a building today which is very much part of our heritage. Last week I was in Normandy and sat in their parliament, and it was an absolute pleasure to be sat there at a desk with power. And so, we need to look forward at what we need. Our sports estate, we're delighted that Oakfield is up and running, going to be opened in the next 10 days' time. I hosted the Jets' first game on Saturday and really positive feedback from that. But we can't stop Le Canave. Last year we had lots of interruption at Le Canave with issues with the roof, etc. So we know that we're going to have to invest money in these parts of our infrastructure. And if we look at the roads, we need to invest more money in our roads. So, and our drains. It's one thing having a fantastic sewage treatment works at Ballazan, but if you can't get the product to Ballazan, then it's not worth having the capacity that we've got.
Yeah, just to carry on this idea, because obviously Jersey Capital Investment Fund is like a pot of money to share out. You're struggling even now to get the funding that you need. Is there a real danger that actually what happens is this big pot of money, you just get a little bit of the pot of money? At this moment in time, you can clearly identify exactly what you require. You have a set, you fight for your budget in your corner, and is actually Jersey Capital Investment Fund actually not helpful at all from
I
infrastructure
think it's
point of view?
incredibly helpful. I'd completely the opposite view to being not helpful.
Okay.
It is a way of us identifying what the island needs for the future,
Okay.
and a way of us actually delivering that.
So you
and
think it'll
not
give you
being-
more leverage rather than less leverage?
Absolutely more leverage, because at
Okay.
the moment we are debating, we need to invest in health, we need to invest in education, we need to invest in security with Home Affairs, but we also need to invest in our infrastructure, because without the infrastructure, none of those other things I mentioned before work.
Absolutely.
So I think the Capital Investment Fund is a great opportunity for us to actually say, this is the roadmap for the next 10 years, 15 years, and this is where we're going. And at the moment, we have a short period of time in government, 4 years at a time, and this will actually hopefully help some of the longer term planning for the island and islanders. Yeah.
Just to add, it's professionals who are the stewards of that infrastructure. We're not money, much of which will last longer than our lifetime. What we really need is reliable and predictable funding, and then you can make long-term plans, and the supply chain can scale up to match those plans and make the investments in asphalt plants or whatever it needs to be in order to protect that infrastructure.
But how does that work when we've seen recently in budgets that there has been these requests for a budget to do certain infrastructure, but actually that's not been spent because there's not been able to spend the money because of that. Delivery is the issue rather than per se. So what is it that makes it?
It's that long-term vision and predictability of the funding. The problem is, if you have a new infrastructure initiative, it takes a while to scale up the supply chains and to build the capacity to be able to deliver. If you're doing it regularly, then the local supply chain will exist. There will be people who become practiced in it. Because if you take something very simple, such as laying roads, for instance, there's certain skills that are required. They're not required in many other industries in Jersey, but you need to sustain that skill base within the island so that they're available for every project. And if the work is peaky, it's very difficult for the private sector to sustain those. And I'm not picking on roads, I just use it as an easy example.
So some of the lorries that are used for the major resurfacing contracts are only used for the major roads resurfacing contracts because they're insulated. So the temperature has to be delivered at a certain heat for it to be as good as it can be. So historically, trucks used to drive around with tarmac in the back with nothing on the top. And now they're insulated with covers, sides are insulated. So those vehicles are used in some cases just for those jobs. And so we want to be able to plan to say, this is the work. So the barber greens that are used to lay the tarmac, if we're not doing major resurfacing, those items are sat parked up. Mm-hmm. So they're still depreciating. And I think I went recently I saw the work that happened in St John's that was planned 5 years before I became minister. I hasten to add, unlike some social media comments that think I got St John's resurfaced 5 years before it was planned. And I saw the work there, and I went recently to see the work in St Clement's. There's a huge amount of work that goes on, and we should invite you to see that happening because it's fantastic, the work that's done, and predominantly by local contractors. So it's really good.
In this, so when we're going back to this, how to set up this capital investment fund and then going forward, when do you first envisage utilising this fund? Like, when will it be ready to kind of be able to get money from it?
That will depend on the debate in the Assembly. But we hope that can happen not long after the budget debate, I would hope. That would be my personal preference. And
I mean, ultimately, the process is being driven by Treasury and Resources, so there is some work to do to look at scoping and so on. I don't know what their timelines are for that work. So.
And then how you will be envisaged to get projects to receive funding? Because you've mentioned a lot of different things. It's roads. I mean, it's basically the infrastructure budget will now sit within this fund. Is what I feel is happening. And how does
so the mechanics just need to be finalised, and that's we've been working on it for a long time. And as I often say, nothing happens quickly, unfortunately. The focus at the moment is the budget, because we've got a timeline to try and get the budget through. So we've taken a back step from investing in Jersey whilst we go through the budget, and then we'll be back full force on investing in Jersey.
But how will you make sure that it's not political, is what I'm trying to say, in the sense that you have, for example, we saw that last year in the budget, is that the previous government had set in motion a number of projects that had been budgeted through, and that was part of HE, and for building, say, for example, Lesquay and some other.
I think Lesquay is a bit of an irregularity, actually, because there's not detailed plans for Lesquay. The plans weren't ready. There was no planning permission, so that wasn't a shovel-ready programme. I think, right to say it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Not a shovel-ready programme.
So does that mean if it's shovel-ready, it doesn't matter which government is in place, they can't pull the plug, basically?
That's the idea of investing in Jersey. It goes longer than each government. So, that's what the island needs, is for us to look not at our boots. We've got to look at our boots at times, but we also need to look at the horizon. We don't spend enough time looking at the horizon.
Right. Councillor, a very simplistic question in a way. I mean, I hear what you say, that you welcome the investment fund. I'm still trying to get my head around as to why that will help you in a way, because you'll still have to fight for your share of that. Are your fellow ministers going to be as receptive to your ideas?
I think I've spent the last 18 months trying to raise the profile of infrastructure. We drive, we walk, we cycle, we ride on the buses, and we just take it all for granted. We've got Victorian sewers running underneath some streets in St Helier. They will not last forever. They've lasted an incredibly long time, but they need to be maintained. We've got rising sea levels, which we need to address, and we've got some fantastic people looking at that, addressing those rising sea levels. It is no good having the island flooded and then starting to think about rising sea levels. We need to think ahead.
So I'm not challenging any of that. We've been there before. Just basic question is, of course, whether your fellow ministers take on board the gravity of the situation, which
Well, I think
maybe they haven't before.
It's not limited to ministers. It's going to be the Assembly that will make some of these decisions. So we will be relying on all states members, or the majority of states members, understanding what we need to do and how we need to do it. And, I don't underestimate the work that's involved between now and getting invested in Jersey through, but at least we've started that journey. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just saying, I mean, to come back to Constable's commentary there, we've got a hospital that needs to be delivered, and clearly there is only so much money around. So the question is if you've got a pot of money with 100 million in it, and you need 120, who gets the money? Does the hospital get the money, or does infrastructure get the money?
Well, I think
these are the kind of challenges.
I think everybody, not only politicians, but I think all islanders expect us to get on and build the hospital as the number one priority.
So that knocks back infrastructure. Well, that's part of my point.
We don't stop and sit down with our arms folded. There's lots of things happening. The infrastructure team will be involved as an enabler for the hospital, and have been involved as an enabler for the hospital.
My point is, how do you prioritise? Because it may sound simple that infrastructure is really, really important, but actually the hospital is really, really important,
health,
as is education. So I'm saying is
health, education,
the problems aren't
security.
different. They're just being shoved into one pot, and it's...
So hopefully, by looking at the whole picture, you can make an informed decision.
Okay.
And what we're trying to do is take some of the emotion out of it, because we can bang the drum about young people and children. We can bang the drum about health. We can bang the drum about home affairs and the need for police, and no one's going to disagree with any of those things. But I'm banging the drum for infrastructure and trying to get colleagues to understand the importance of infrastructure. Yeah, it's a necessity. It's not a nice to have. We need to invest in our island. Yeah, and we need to do that for the long term as well as the short term.
Minister, you talked before in our last hearings about the shortfall in the funding pressures and the shortfalls on rates and higher waste export charge costs, etc.
Yeah.
And we see that their waste charges will only potentially be introduced from 2028, though you have mentioned before that you had wanted to see them come sooner, right? Than that.
Absolutely, and so we have got money. I think it's around £250,000, slightly more perhaps, to work on waste charges. I think it's £300,000, John, and that's where we have to make the priorities. So when we're trying to deliver what we need to deliver and look to the future, that work has to happen. I'd have been very happy to have been coming to the Assembly with a proposal for waste charges. But when you look at the level of work in terms of engaging with stakeholders, making sure that it's fair and equitable for people, because the last time the department tried to do that, it was not fair and equitable. It was targeting a certain part of the community and leaving other parts of the community who perhaps were greater users of water and creating of waste alone. So we have to try and be consistent across that. So there is work going on in the background. There's lots of work going on in the background. But we have to be realistic, and perhaps I wasn't realistic in my attempts to get stuff done. You can't do everything, unfortunately.
And there's 3 million being additional funding being allocated, kind of so that there is that work being able to be done for the charges. Is this adequate?
No, 300,000. Yeah.
The 3 million figure that's within there was a proposal a couple of years ago. We've lost a chunk of income within solid waste. That is offsetting that temporarily until waste charges can come in. That is due to fall away in 2027.
Okay.
And that is giving us some significant budgetary issues.
So it's not enough for it, it's there, but it's not enough.
There's two separate things, I think. So
Yeah.
One's offsetting
the work on the waste charges is the £300,000 I talked about.
Yeah.
We have lost revenue. We've seen less revenue generated by waste than expected from existing income streams, and that is challenging for us.
Can you give more detail to that?
Well, with a reduction in large construction, we see less waste being delivered to Lacolle. Right. That's as basic as it is, really. There are others. So we also have less green waste, or we saw a reduction in green waste. I think that has gone back up again. It is about managing that. But we know, for example, we've mentioned the hospital several times. We're going to see waste coming back.
It will come back. You think it will come back, but at the moment there's just the shortfall.
The big issue we have with solid waste at the moment is Lacolle is full. So all solid waste, inert waste incoming is now recycled. There is a much more significant cost to that operation than just putting it in a hole. So that is where we have some significant cost pressures effectively on that side of it. That, with other capital schemes that are ongoing in the future, that might create additional space for receiving inert waste, but at the moment it is a significant pressure.
So with the Advancer line, we could end up importing materials.
So I know Deputy Ward is going to talk about ask more questions later on specifically on waste going forward. So I'm sure we'll touch on this again. And just last questions I just want to talk about, because we haven't, Minister, talked for a while about the Island Construction Engineering Programme, or ICE. And I was just wondering if you could give us a bit of an update on that.
I don't really have much of an update on the ICE programme. I think an update is due to be given in the next 6 to 8 weeks to the industry. We're happy to give you that update when it's ready. But if work hasn't started, then clearly that pushes everything to the right. and if planning permission has been sought and isn't approved, then clearly that pushes things. But we can get an update for you on the ICE programme. It's a great piece of work, and I think the industry appreciate that piece of work.
That would be my next question is, if the industry, how they've been receptive to this, and I believe that they were starting, that part of the programme was to try and encourage them also to utilise the programme.
Yeah, absolutely, and I attended a breakfast briefing of the industry several months ago when the ICE programme was presented to the industry, and it was very well received at the time. So it's, these things don't change weekly. So it's when there's major updates that we need to go out to the programme. So I'd expect an update before Christmas.
Right. And when just linking that to the budget, does the maybe it's something that the panel can have a bit more update, and maybe even visualise it and see what it looks like, maybe as well, because does it link to the capital lines in the budget? There are different projects there. Does that
100%,
feed into the
100%? But it's not just government work that's planned. There's work there from our ALOs and some work from some of the major developers. So, it's a broader picture than government, but we can get that information shared with you in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Thank you. Constable.
Yes, okay. The recent CNAG report on critical infrastructure resilience, that report made a number of recommendations, and we expect you or government will issue an official response in due course. Can you, for now, share your initial response for the report?
Well, in general terms, I was quite happy, as I normally am, with the CNAG's reports. The one area that I wasn't happy was with the Northern Bus Link. We agreed a contract with our current provider, which was significantly cheaper than our previous contract, and my wish was to invest some of that money into additional services. That money was used for other things without consultation with me as the Minister. So the bus link was then funded, having received advice using monies from the Climate Emergency Fund, which I think is a good use of monies from the Climate Emergency Fund, because it's available to all of the public to use, and not just people who can afford to buy a bike or something, or a car. So I think that route could have been achieved a different method. I have a little bit of knowledge about transport and logistics, but I understand why it was put in the way it's put in. And it's been reasonably well received, particularly by visitors to the zoo, where a quarter of passengers get on the bus at the zoo. So that's quite encouraging. I'd like to see more promotion of that bus, because it can help people who don't go and see neighbours who are not able to drive, and who live in neighbouring parishes to use it. So I hope that we see ridership increased. In terms of other areas of the review, I think we've accepted some of the comments, and we've already implemented some of the work. I think some of the work was already in train. So we'll be responding to that review. I'm not sure the timescale. Do you know the timescale?
So there's a matrix being completed, and a lot of the points that were brought out for us will have been addressed. I think that matrix goes back to COM in the end of the month, and then at some point after that it goes back to the Public Accounts Committee for them to review progress upon. I'm speaking specifically around the infrastructure piece. In terms of the number 10 bus, I think it's important to note that at the time of the CAG review, there wasn't the paperwork to provide on how we would do the assessment on the carbon accounting, but that is now in place. It just, there's basically a lag between that and getting the documentation there, and that documentation wasn't there at that time.
But that route, what you say, is in operation, albeit funded by a different means. Are there any variances in the actual operation of it, which...
Well, it's now, when it was introduced, it was quite a nonsense, in my opinion. It was running between probably 9 o'clock and 2:30, which wasn't much use to people. and they were advertising lunches in rural pubs, which you could go to, but you couldn't get back. So it was a bit of a... So it's now running every 2 hours, and it enables people to go from the eastern parishes right through to Kennervay. So youngsters can go to the Kennervay skate park. People with appointments can go to the Enid Kenno Centre. People can go to the airport and back again from the airport. So there is lots of potential, and it should hopefully help some of those rural businesses which may slow down in the winter. And, you know, this week we've seen the magazine advertising the hospitality lunches and dinners. So hopefully people may utilise the bus to go and access the services of some of those venues which are off the beaten track without having to go to town and out of town again.
Yeah.
And is it now part of the contract with Liberty Bus, or is it being funded still by the Climate Emergency
It's
Fund?
funded by the Climate Emergency
And
Fund.
what happens when that funding will...
It's a good question.
So it's a one-year pilot at this point, so it's limited time funding, and then we'll, depending on...
It's a bit longer than a year.
Is it?
But it is, yeah, we've basically got funding till sometime next September, and then we'll review the ridership then and how much support it needs and take it from there.
As far as you're concerned, it's a permanent fixture. in some form.
No, it's not a permanent fixture, unfortunately. We've got to evaluate it. So it's a case of use it or lose it. Would be my message, and I would hope that people will promote the usage of it. I'm hoping, certainly in my parish magazine, I've been promoting the fact that it's there. We don't have a significant budget to promote it using physical methods. There is a lot of promotion online, and I think we've had quite good hits online for the bus. The other thing we're doing around buses is explain to people the benefits of riding the bus, because if you compare the costs of riding the bus to running a second car, running a car, it's quite significant. So if you're buying a monthly parking ticket in St Helier, it's £172.80. If you buy a monthly bus pass, it's £55. If you add in fuel and depreciation, insurance and servicing of a car, people could be saving significant money each year by riding the bus. And many people who get the same bus as I do, the number 5, do it because of the cost efficiencies. I see young families or young professionals getting on the bus because they've gone down to one car because of the cost benefits. And we're going to start promoting that on the back of buses, electronically on social media, but also in car parks, because this really is a great opportunity. We've seen an increase of concessionary fares go from 17% to near 40%. So we've seen a good uptake of young people who will be the bus riders of tomorrow, taking the bus. So there's a lot of work for us to do there.
We'll go talk a little bit more about sustainable transport later, but Conchal was focusing a bit more on the infrastructure, the resilience, so that wider piece.
Again, the CNAG report declared as its first priority a request for a clear definition of island critical structure, including sea, aircraft and on-island transport, and key routes that fall within the definition. Has a definition for that actually been agreed? And
well,
will that be finalised?
I'm not involved with the air links or the sea links, but at the roads, certainly the teams, in my experience, and that goes back many years, they prioritise which roads need to be cleared first and priority. There's more work happening with the parishes. The parishes are being more coordinated, so there's work going on with the emergency planning team, which parishes are all represented at. So, for example, in St John, I can tell you that our snow plan didn't used to include Cheval Rock, because Cheval Rock was a hotel which closed in the winter. Our plan has changed substantially because Cheval Rock is now a nursing home. And for example, in Storm Ciarán, we need to be able to get staff in and staff out. And we need to ensure that if an emergency vehicle was needed to get there. So our plans change and evolve, just like the government's plans change and evolve And I think the team are to be congratulated on the great work they do, the flexibility they show. Some of those people work through the night to ensure things are done, and putting it on a more formal basis is happening. But perhaps you want to talk about that, Tris.
Just add very briefly, if I may. So what we have is a strategic road network, which is based on the type of vehicles that use it. So we know what the logistics routes are. We know which roads obviously go to hospitals and other important community amenities. So our operational plans are all focused around that, and it's likewise how we support the buses moving around in terms of gritting and the hills, etc. They all exist in operational plans, and that's been developed over decades, and that's why the island is as resilient as it is. What the Controller Auditor General is asking for is those plans be translated into an emergency preparedness plan, which is much more strategic, which looks at more how the chain of command works and sets all that out so that can go in a formal emergency plan. So the ingredients are all there, the information is all there. It's lifting some of that information and putting it into this higher level strategic plan. But for the comfort of the population, the actual processes are all in place right now and have been tested.
Yeah, I'll follow up in a minute, but I think...
Yeah, I just want to follow up because obviously one of the big issues this summer has been so much, a huge level of roadworks,
Yes.
which has caused massive disruption. There's two words that have just been picked out here. One is coordinated and the other one is strategic. I wouldn't describe the digging up of all the roads that took place in this summer as being either coordinated or strategic.
Well,
So how does, I'm curious to know how you justify that level of disruption in an island at the height of the season?
Well, the justification is there's 20% less traffic on the roads during school holidays.
But that's secondary to tourism and visitor economy.
It is, but I remember when we had hire cars and public queuing up at the Shell Garden at the top of St Albans Hill, getting into town in the summer. That doesn't happen these days. The work on St Clement's Coast Road was planned for 5 years, over 5 years, when it was going to take place. There was lots of dialogue. I went to one of the public meetings to get the feedback. I visited the Constable of St Clement's on the penultimate day of the works, and he was really complimentary about the interaction with the team, the quality of the work, and understood the work had to be done. That work was scheduled to offer the least disruption as possible. Trinity Road, we didn't want to close Trinity Road for as long as it was closed, but when you find a void underneath a road, you cannot just fill it. You've got to do the work.
It's not so much the work needs to be done.
And the work on Trinity Road was
Yeah.
delayed because of the work that was done in Rouge-Boyon. And again, that was a safety issue. When I visited the property, my first thoughts before visiting was, well, you can open one road, one lane of traffic. But when you saw the property and you saw the width of the crack and the level of risk that was associated with that, you could not open the road, not even for pedestrians. So there's a system called Traffic Works, where works are planned and scheduled, and that's not only for government roads but also for parish roads. That works, I would say, reasonably well. We've currently got the local electric company doing the big upgrade, I think it's called. And if you consider the level of work we've got to do, we have over 500 miles of sewers under the roads. The water have a similar length of water pipes. Electric will have more. Islands Energy will have significant kilometres of gas under the roads. We aren't replacing that as quickly as possible. So there will be more roadworks rather than less roadworks in the near future.
I'm not sure that's so much comfort to the public.
There will be comfort. The issue is, David,
Yeah.
you have to upgrade your infrastructure. Leaving it there and it becoming failing causes more disruption, just as we saw with Trinity Road, because we found voids there, and that took far longer to fix than the planned works. So it's not going to be much comfort, but hopefully the public will take comfort from the fact that we're addressing these issues which have been left for far too long.
Okay, sorry, I'm conscious I'm interrupting the Constable's question.
Well, no,
Sorry, I don't mean to-
the deputy's question touched on areas which we're dealing with
apologise.
in a minute in road transport. Before we leave the critical structure, just one final question, May. You already mentioned that certain areas, air and on-island sea and air aren't within your area. I mean, therefore, what extent are you collaborating with other ministers in implementing the CNAG's recommendations? Or are you doing sort of on a piece-by-piece
So
basis?
each department will be drafting their responses, and that will come to the council of ministers, and we'll discuss it then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I just add a little point to Deputy Orr's question? And that is really that. So the report was about infrastructure resilience. We've underinvested in all of our infrastructure for decades. What you're seeing is a less resilient infrastructure. And that is because the infrastructure is ageing, but also there is new equipment that needs to be put in to keep up with modern times. In terms of how it's coordinated, we have to take a view of where the public good lies and also what makes economic sense. When you fill potholes, that's effectively money wasted. It keeps people safe, but it doesn't do anything to preserve the condition of the road network. And so the work, you can do it better in the summer, but you have to be careful of which routes. So the routes we chose were routes where there wasn't specific tourist facilities on them, or where we could mitigate that. So we wouldn't do St. Brellar's Bay, for instance, in the middle of the summer, but there are routes where we know that the alternative is having complete congestion on the school days, everyone trying to get there. So it's trying to balance that with these increasing number of emergency type operations that occur, either due to gas or to buildings that have become unsafe or to voids underneath the road. And it's a really difficult balance. And I think anyone can always say, you could always done it a different way. But the other way might not have been any better.
I think we've got a number of questions.
Yes,
Someone's
the
gonna focus
Deputy
on-
Ward's question, your answers have dealt with some of the points I'm going to raise, but just going back to the plan, as it were, a general one, the CNAG's report commented on the resilience of Jersey's transport infrastructure and highlighted significant backlog to road maintenance and questioned whether current funding is adequate. So on that specific point, how large is that backlog today in measurable terms, and how are you tackling it?
Well, I think we, in an ideal world, we would probably double the investment on our roads maintenance. So we're probably spending £7.5–8 million a year, and we probably could spend £16 million a year on roads maintenance. I think there's probably a steady state, which is probably around the £12 million mark. But, we assess the quality of the roads. That's done regularly. We use technology to do that. I think we use AI in times, don't we?
There's some AI incorporated in it. We've got a
Yeah.
30-year model of the road network and its
Yeah.
deterioration, and we can measure the level of impairment, so the amount of value of the road network which has been consumed, which is the gap between it being perfect and where it is now.
And when you were saying about that 8 million, and it really should be 16 million, and obviously that's related to the budget discussions and the fact that there is these discussions now with the capital investment fund. Would you be seeing that you would then be able to get that 12 million or 16 million, or do you still see that there'll be an issue?
We would be hoping for an increase in the investment specifically for that. But the other thing we're looking at is we use a treatment called micro asphalt, which is not resurfacing. Micro asphalt is basically a product that is sprayed onto the road, and that is designed to prolong the life of the road. And we've had various levels of success with that. In some areas, it's fantastic. In other areas, for example, at Mofor, when the contractors were back this year, they had to repair the work they'd done at Mofor the year before. You need to have areas that the sun gets to and there's plenty of traffic that goes over it, because it kind of welds the product in. And I'm looking with the team at whether or not we continue to do that, because that allows us to do more roads than otherwise, or whether we adopt a similar method to what happens in Guernsey, where they do what's called a top coat. Now, the top coat is more expensive than the micro asphalt, but what we're trying to ascertain is the life, the length of that process. Lots of our roads, we must remember, carry far more weight than when they were constructed. So we see double-decker buses, which we used to see a long time ago, but double-decker buses are on the roads. We see large trucks on the road. and the volume of heavier vehicles on the road. So the reconstruction, when we do the reconstruction of the roads, it is significant and designed to last for tens of years.
So when we
Just on this, it's a mathematical point, but it's an important point. So the damaging effect of a vehicle is a power 3 ratio. And what that means is basically one truck does as much damage as about 124,000 cars. Now, cars are getting heavier. So some of those cars now are almost like truck weights. And it isn't just linear, it's exponential how much additional damage they manage to cause to the road. Because a traditional family car really doesn't do any damage at all, just polishes the surface a bit.
And I suppose linking the 2 points that Deputy Ward mentioned about this summer there was more roadworks. Well, we're seeing more roadworks in general because you're also trying to decrease that backlog, or as you've mentioned, you know, there is this underinvestment and there is this real need. You're saying that there will be money available in the capital investment fund specifically that hopefully will increase. So are we then going to see then an increase in the amount of roadworks? And do we have the capacity to do that?
We're going to see significant, you know, I think it's worth remembering that a lot of the roadworks are not generated by government. So the upgrade of the electricity is done by the local electricity provider, and they are doing miles of replacement. We have got significant work to do to upgrade the drains for the new. Not only have we got to build big attenuation tanks, we've got to be able to get the product from the homes to those tanks. So there's significant work that's going to be done. We're looking to utilise going across fields where we possibly can, but that's not always possible. So there's going to be significant disruption for long periods of time whilst these works are carried out. The planning that goes into it is significant. The infrastructure teams talk to the local parishes, they talk to the bus operator. So unless it's an emergency, it doesn't happen without going through a whole process and registered on traffic works. So that's where all of the works are registered. And we're desperately trying to get water to work with ourselves and electricity to make sure if we're digging up a road, we dig it up once. And
so they don't do it at the moment?
well, they do. They say that we do, but I'm aware of some instances where one utility's got plans to do something, and we've said, don't do that work because we need to talk to the other utilities. The monthly meetings are designed to ensure there's as much collaboration as possible, but I think there could be more collaboration. And again, it's about thinking forward, because if we're putting a new power cable in a road today, how long before we've got to put a new water pipe through that same road? And why don't we put the pipe there? We don't even have to connect it. Let's put it down at the same time. So there's a lot of work does take place, but I think we could actually do more.
Just on one last point, just a point about more roadworks. If we had more money, we would have to cover more area. But it's not just that, it's the depth you go down. So the deeper you can reconstruct the road, the longer it will be before we have to go back again. So at the moment, on our business network, what we call the Class 1 network, which is basically from town to the airport to the east of the island, it lasts about 10 years. But if you could ever do a deep reconstruction and put down a 300 millimetre pavement, it's basically got an indeterminate life, and you would just have to replace the wearing surface occasionally. We're nowhere near that. Our roads aren't designed for the traffic. So additional funding would allow you to start doing both.
Sorry, just going back to the backlog, as it were, and the fact you'd like twice as much money. Are you saying that for the next year or so, that's going to be the position, and you're therefore your way of achieving reduction of backlog is really to look at the alternatives, the
team,
alternative methods of servicing.
Yeah, we've got a great team that are involved in the highways maintenance, who put a lot of time and effort into getting things right. You know, we spoke earlier about efficiencies, and they work really hard with the local suppliers, and we'll continue to look as technology changes, as products change. We'll continue to look at that and whether or not they're appropriate for the island. Because some products are too expensive to bring to the island. So we've got to consider that. And the type of stone that is generated on the island is different to other areas and therefore has different positives and negatives for it.
And just to add, the type of maintenance, the micro-surfacings we've been talking about, that's about preserving what we've got and keeping it as defect-free as possible. The other part of it is the resurfacing, which is the renewal of that infrastructure. So you'll always have a mix of the two.
Okay, thanks. Yes, I had a point about the Trinity Road, but I think you probably dealt with that already. So moving on to the impact of roadworks on local businesses, which has been the subject of the press comment. Has any consideration been given to compensation where trading has been significantly affected?
I have a huge amount of sympathy with people who are impacted, but I think I've made the point fairly clear. We don't have enough money to do the amount of work we want to do, and if we have to divert some of that revenue to people that have been disrupted, then we'll have less money to do the works. It's a significant challenge for some businesses, and some businesses plan their holidays around when the works are there. That's why we publish 5 years in advance where we're going to be doing resurfacing works. Clearly, if there's an emergency, you can't publish that 5 years in advance, but we do give as much information as possible. We certainly work hard in terms of signage, and where we're asked to add signage, we'll give that due consideration, and often we'll put in additional signage.
Yeah, we can interrupt you there. I mean, that's one of the problems, the allegations that signage is being confusing, and I know you say that the public aren't observing them. Can more be done on the signage?
Well,
explanation?
I think there's two things we should do on the signage. We should remind people that we're investing in the island when we're doing this work, and we should also remind people of the penalties if you ignore a road sign. Now, I go back to Easter when there were significant works in St John, and it was fairly straightforward. I thought if you followed the signs, you went from A to B fairly reasonably. It took a little bit longer, but it was fairly okay. If you ignored the signs, you got yourself in a right 2 and 8. And sometimes the signs are put in the wrong place, or a truck knocks a sign so you can't see it. But in general, I think the team do a good job with signage. But, if somebody's got a business and they ask for us to put another sign, we generally would try and do that for them.
Yeah, I just want to come back to businesses because it doesn't matter how good the signs are. I'm looking at Trinity Stores as classic one. I think we had a fish and chip place at Grandbeau. We had a tennis club, which businesses were absolutely up in arms about what's going on. I mean, it's all well and good saying to these businesses, well, pick and choose when you shut down, take your holidays because the government tells you should be doing that's the way to operate. I don't know that's any consolation that the landlords aren't stopping the rent whilst you're digging up the roads. What consolation can we give to businesses when you do major disruption, when the government is involved in major disruption of this level? And we're not talking about the odd hole in the ground. We're talking about weeks of disruption. And that's massive impact on cash flow of businesses. So what comfort could you give to businesses that have their interests at heart?
Well, I've spoken to at least one of those business owners, and I have a lot of sympathy with that organisation because we did a lot of work at Trinity. Then the parish did a lot of work reinstating a wall. It might be the other way around. And then the local electric company came along and dug a hole. And that's my point about coordinating things and trying to do things more collaboratively. One of those businesses you mentioned did close for annual holidays through their choice. And a club...
So it's choice, I think, forced to.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
And the club has got the ability to communicate with their members to advise them of the roadworks. We do a lot of work. We've done for the last probably 12 months. Every weekend we publish the roadworks for the following week. We do that as often as we can. The local media help us with announcements about road closures. So we're really keen to try and promote where roads are closed and the alternative routes. but it is a challenge for business. I fully accept it's a challenge for businesses. But I've also dealt with a business who told me that we're going to lose £1,800 in a day, which closes frequently, and I just couldn't do the maths personally.
And just on the, you talked a lot about communication and being able to in advance to communicate with businesses and with the public. Has there been done an assessment on this communication that this has been, the right level of communication, that there could be done any lessons learned from that?
I think driving home last week, I saw the signs advertising that the marathon was going to take place on the 5th of October. And, lots of advance warning takes place for events, for roadworks, when we know about the roadworks. And I hasten to add, we don't always know about roadworks. And sometimes when we plan to do works, Trinity Road's a great example, the sewer was in the middle of the road, so you couldn't open one carriageway or the other, because ideally we would have opened one carriageway to keep some of the traffic flowing. And then you have to consider, do you put no parking on Langley Avenue and Langley Park, which would have allowed the traffic to flow more easily? What's the impact on the residents who park outside their houses? So there's lots of things that the team take into account. I don't know if we have surveyed people in that area to say whether we did a good or a bad job around communicating. But I think for a good number of years now, the infrastructure department, probably from the time of Deputy Fay, introduced pre-advice on when roads were going to be closed. And it is about encouraging people to follow those signs. It really is, and not think that the signs are there for everyone else but me.
The process has been refined over the years, and so what we have is standard procedures which we impose upon utilities, etc., for the type of works and the type of road that they're working on, and that sets what the advance notification needs to be, and letter drops, etc.
Thank you. I think one last question.
Just for that one, if I may, Chair, you talk about the policing and the enforcement of it. I mean, how practical is that, given that have there been any discussions with the honouraries?
We've seen some parishes who have engaged more than others in terms of policing. It's about availability of officers, isn't it?
That's what I'm getting at.
Where we've seen that, I think words of advice have been given to people rather than heavy fines. When you see people blatantly ignoring road close signs, it's frustrating, because you're spending money. And we close the road for 24 hours. I think that's an important point to make. We close the road for 24 hours when we're doing major reconstruction, because it saves us about a day a week in terms of having to make the road safe for vehicles to pass, and then undoing that work before we start again the following day. So it's probably an hour and a half a day that we save, and therefore it shortens the length of period that the roads are closed for.
I mean, short ones, I understand. Anyway, just that's the end of the question on roads generally. Apart from the legislative point, really, at the last hearing you said that the Roads and Traffic Law Review was a massive piece of work, scheduled to take 5 years, with law drafting to begin in quarter of 2025. We're now in that quarter. No, not quite, are we? Can you confirm whether this drafting has now begun or is about to begin? And
there's a huge amount of consultation which has involved the 13 highway authorities around the island, and that work is continuing.
And we are on the cusp of actually starting the drafting instructions.
Okay, and you maintain that it will be a 5-year programme, will you?
We're getting through the 5-year programme. I can't give you an update exactly where it.
Okay.
The work probably started 2 years ago.
Yes, basically. So it's well on. There are a lot of principles, and the high-level legal advice is now received back, which will allow law drafting instructions to be produced.
Okay, thanks. Look forward to that.
And it's prioritised by theme.
Moving away from roads.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of road. So there's revitalising town. The panel wishes to note that it will be scrutinising the common strategic policy priority of revitalising town in much greater detail, But one thing which is obviously coming up right now is that you've started phase 1 of the improvement of Broad Street on the 1st of September. Could you, and that covers sort of Lloyds Bank to Post Office, could you explain why the project has been split up into 4 phases and what factors determine the timing of each phase?
Well, quite simply, consultation with stakeholders. So the traders in the area didn't want us to be doing major works during the Christmas peak period, for example. So that's a good example of where we have had dialogue with the key stakeholders. Broad Street is part of the retail strategy. It's part of the visitor strategy. There is significant benefits in investing in public realm, which is recognised globally. And locally, we've seen 5 new al fresco applications in the New Street, New Cut area since we finished the work there, which is fantastic. We've seen great take up in Halkett Street since we did the work with the parish in Halkett Street. So the work is done in phases so as to minimise disruption and noise for local traders. And
That's fine. So I'm going to cut you short because we've got a load of questions and we're running behind schedule here. So thank you for that answer. So on King Street, New Street and New Cut, pedestrian priority is being introduced. How are you engaging with traders on that and disabled groups and other users to assess the impact of the trial and what feedback have you
we've
had
done
so
a
far?
huge amount of effort with the blue badge holders. We've written to every blue badge holder and encouraged them to take part in a survey. We've introduced 3 parking spaces outside of the banks for a 2-hour period.
So the follow-up question to that is really is what would determine that it becomes permanent, as far as you're concerned?
As far as I'm concerned, it is permanent.
Right, okay.
It is permanent, isn't it? Is it 12 months permanent?
It's done under Article 68, which is basically it allows you to trial it in case there's anything that we've not anticipated.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the Article 68, we'll be recommending to the Minister, as long as nothing comes out of the woodwork, that it be replaced by
How
full
long
order.
does that usually
12
last?
months.
It's
12 months, yes.
then
And it's a simple facility to create a Article 68 when it is to get a full order.
Okay, that's great. So moving on to the town markets. Minister, at our quarterly hearing in March, you told the panel that you'd been seen plans costing at around £12 million for the markets, but that you would not support progressing them. Since that large scheme is not being taken forward, what alternative plans are in place and when can Islanders expect to see them delivered?
Well, we do need to invest in the markets and particularly in the floors of the markets. And hopefully that is going to be happening in the near future. The Constable of St Helier has responsibility for the markets, delegated to him. And we're both aligned that we need to invest in the market, but not to the extent of the £12 million.
Yeah, you said, okay. So you reckon that floor improvements and things like that will be 2026? Is that your anticipation?
I certainly hope that we can start some of the work.
To do that? Okay, fine, great. So to move on, how has the decision been taken to rule out more substantial capital investment taken? Was there a formal options appraisal? So given the ministerial council emphasis on revitalising St Helier, do you accept that shelving larger market investment may have expectations unmet?
Well, I think the plans for the market were very grand, and I think what we've done is worked closely with the market traders who wanted to have some kind of surety that they weren't going to be displaced for alternatives. And so we put a lot of work and effort, and particularly the Constable of St Helier, in finding agreement with the market traders to put them on a firmer footing rather than a 12-month rolling contract. Sure. And I think the dialogue with the market traders has helped us come to our decision. Sure. We don't need to rebrand the markets into something totally different, but we should celebrate the uniqueness of our Jersey markets.
No, absolutely agree with that.
But we need to. That doesn't mean to say we don't invest in them.
No. Okay, so future projects. At the last hearing, you mentioned ambitions for green space at Springfield and improvements at Rouge Beyond. How are these being prioritised and funded in the budget in 2026? And what are the indicative delivery timelines?
So we've, in terms of Springfield, we're looking at play area in Springfield. Hopefully when the school closes, where that will become a green space, but that's certainly not going to be in 2026. And what was the other area, sorry?
Rouge Bouillon.
So Rouge Bouillon is the same. We've got a lot of work to do in the Rouge Bouillon area. And whilst some of the planning work will start in 2026, I don't see any of the building work starting in 2026.
Do you see Rouge Bouillon actually closing down as well and being moved to potentially a super school on Gas Place?
Well, you'd need to ask the Education Minister for the details, but I understand it's an incredibly large catchment area at Rouge Bouillon, and my understanding is that the school will move to Gas Place whilst works at Rouge Bouillon are done to build a new school, and then Rouge Bouillon's community will move back to the school, and then the two schools, St Luke's and Springfield, will move into the new school at Gas Place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. So the panel wishes to note that its upcoming public hearing with Jersey Property Holdings scheduled 7th of October. So this hearing will examine the organisation's model. Within the most recent strategic property management report published in May, the CNAG concluded JPH is still not functioning as a corporate landlord, and you previously said JPH needs a, quote, rebrand and relaunch. Will you take any steps towards the relaunch before the end of this term?
I would like to think we can, but it's not all in my gift. So, we've done. I think I've mentioned the progress we've made with the schools, putting in terms service level agreements. But education receives a similar amount of money for property than Property Holdings does, and education is responsible for less property than we are. So there is an imbalance, and we are looking at other models.
Okay. It just come on to that point about SLAs. What tangible difference have you seen since those have been? Has it improved things, reduced disputes? Has it improved maintenance clarity?
I believe it has, but I'd ask.
I think so. One of the things we've introduced and made sure that we follow through on are more regular meetings between the management, the maintenance officers, and the school heads and caretakers. So actually going on site and listening to what people have got to say. I think that the feedback generally is that this is improving things, that the schools feel more franchised, less disenfranchised.
Sure.
And we are getting to the bottom of some of the challenges. Having said that, we still continue to have a chronic under-resource in the work that we can do. So there are sort of material issues, perhaps on areas that schools see as sufficient play space or teaching space that it is difficult to respond to.
Sure.
At the same time, again, as the Minister observed, we're working closely with the Education Department to make sure that our views, the department's views and the school's views are fused and that there are no sort of independent activities that could take a priority away from the Education Department or the school's view or our view, and that we're operating much more in sync. But the bottom line is that we still don't have enough
We've done a
resources.
lot of work to get, for example, I've spoken about this before, around the usage of facilities at school buildings. The Minister, Education Minister and myself have worked closely together to get that information. It's taken a lot longer than we had both hoped, but we have that information. We are also working on other areas of school estate that may be getting utilised for other things, which we're trying to align with our strategy.
Okay, fine, thank you. That's actually answered one of my questions I was going to bring up later. So to evaluate progress on strategic site developments, Minister, we're now midway through the design phase of the Fort Regent development process.
Yeah.
Can you update us on the progress to date and confirm whether the project remains on track to submit a full planning application by December 2025?
The answer to that is yes. The team are doing some great work. The planning application for the roof and facade should be in by the end of November, and the site-wide application is still scheduled to be in place for the end of December, as are the external landscapes. We've had some pre-planning advice feedback received about a month ago, and we're in discussions with planning around that. We're also talking to a number of stakeholders, and the nursery is confirmed that we will have a nursery provision on the site, and we've not only spoken to the existing provider, but we've also spoken to colleagues in SIPES to ensure that there is the demand, because that is a good...
So that's going to be retained throughout the works?
So it'll be retained whilst the new one is being built. Yeah.
Okay, okay. I mean, it's quite interesting. You're talking as through infrastructure, but obviously this is your delivery arm is Jersey Development Company. So I'm trying to understand how that mechanics works.
So we are responsible for Fort Regent.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And JDC simply deliver.
They're our agent.
They're your agent, and they do the delivery. You do all the sort of, I say, the hard work of getting all the paperwork sorted out for them to deliver that.
I wouldn't underestimate the efforts put in by the team at the Jersey Development Company, and I'm really pleased with the partnership that we've got with them.
No, just understanding the relationship, that's all.
Ultimately, Tim is the officer with responsibility for Fort Regent.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry, I
I'll
think you've answered my question. I was going to say who is actually driving it forward, given the relationship with the development company.
The Regeneration Steering Group discussed Fort Regent almost at all of their meetings, and in fact, it was discussed only last week at the Regeneration Steering Group, and the Regeneration Steering Group signalled their contentment with the progress that has been made so far. The ongoing works. So, we're talking to people from outside the organisation about a whole range of things. We're talking to potential cinema operators, people that may help us with the concert hall or show court, whatever you want to call it, the big space, and outdoor initiatives. So there's lots of dialogue going on, and I think our partner, the Jersey Development Company, should be congratulated on the work they've done to date.
And with that, obviously the planning applications that are going through is to make it like a space, a safe and secure space, as you've talked about before. It needs some work to then start filling it with potentially these different plans and these different companies potentially providing different things. Of course, we've talked, there was in the presentation before about potential hotel on the outside. Would that be a separate planning application at a different point in time?
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the hardest things to get planning permission for, but the fort will need to be up and running regardless of whether there is or isn't a hotel there. I understand there is some interest from operators in the potential of a hotel, but I don't underestimate the challenges with the swimming pool structure having been removed. From a historic buildings perspective, it's not going to be an easy decision to make, I should think.
Does that then mean that the fort will be sustainable enough to be able to be run without the revenue from a hotel, or not? It's not reliant on each other, as in we could still see these things going through without having a hotel?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, I mean, just carrying on with strategic sites, Philip Lefevre House, I was noted, is sitting empty and has been sat empty for some time now since the Social Security Department have moved out. It was put up for sale and expressions of interest were sought, and I understand that those interests were brought in, but subsequently the site was withdrawn from the market. Is there a possibility, can you explain why that action was taken and why you didn't progress with a sale of the site?
Yeah, I can, and it is actually on the market, and I understand people were viewing it either last week or this week.
Has it just gone on the market again?
No, it's been on the market for some
Okay,
time.
Yeah.
well, yeah, but it was sorry.
What's happened is we were looking at selling the whole site, including the old youth club, as I describe it.
Yes, yeah.
And at the back of Lamott Street, we have a very important function, which is known as the diner. And it's used for a lot of mental health patients. and the health department have been given a licence to use that part of the site to continue that service. So the Social Security Fund didn't own that part of the building. They owned Philip Lefevre House and Huguenot House, and those are the two parts that are on the market, which is actively being promoted. And I'm aware because somebody contacted me about how they would arrange a visit. So I'm aware that visits are taking place.
Yeah.
But I just come back to the point was there was clearly an expressions of interest originally put out there, and those expressions of interest were responded to. You know, there were companies out there who tried to put in bids for the site. Obviously, renewing this effort. So my question really was why was that process stalled originally? Why are we now still waiting?
One of the expressions of interest was from our own department to provide a much-needed service for mental health patients.
Okay.
So the decision was made to.
But we have a construction industry which is on its knees, and surely we should be getting on and making sure we look after that.
So there will be significant investment required for the area that is being retained by government. But, you know, I think having visited the diner, I can see huge benefits on the location. It's in town, but it's not in the middle of town, so it's quite discreet, and I think that's a great opportunity that we shouldn't give up.
Are you saying, Minister, that because of that expression of interest from a government department, that the site has changed? So in a sense, that the site
absolutely correct.
That because of that, there needs to be this new launch and new consideration.
Exactly. If we're in an expression of interest, and there's a change, then you have to go back out again.
With a different dimension.
With a different option.
And would this space still being considered as for flats, or is open for
So the Bridge and Island Plan identifies it as affordable homes. We've had a number of expressions of interest, ranging from a park to a car park to accommodation to a hotel. So whoever buys the site will have to go through the relevant planning processes for whatever.
You see the Bridge and Island Plan being overridden. You see the overridden.
I didn't say I saw the Bridge and Island Plan overridden.
Okay.
I said quite explicitly there'd been a number of expressions of interest for different things. The Bridge and Island Plan is clear; it's for affordable homes.
Okay, so what I'm just saying is just to clarify that point, is that for anybody who has an expressions of interest out there, that they do not worry about the fact that in the Bridge and Island Plan it says for affordable homes.
I didn't say that at all, David.
I'm trying to understand what you are saying. That's why.
The Bridging Island Plan is very clear that the site has been identified for affordable homes. We have had people express interest for a whole range of uses, and they would need to follow the planning process.
Okay.
Full stop.
Thank you. I think we'll move on to sustainable transport
Okay.
and active travel. Though I was noting the time, we've talked a little bit about buses, for example. I have a few more questions, but one question I have is that you mentioned in your business plan for 2025 a cycling and walking infrastructure strategy, which I know we've talked about before in other hearings. You've talked about walking through St Helier with the Conotab. We haven't seen that strategy. Where is it? And
So I'm pleased to say that we have got a working group which includes government officials, parish officials and members of Cycle for Jersey, who are working on a number of proposed plans, and that work is some of that work went to the Parish Roads Committee last week and was approved for the cycle networks. Tris? Did they support one of the schemes, I think, didn't they?
Yep.
And so that work is moving ahead. You'll be aware that we've extended the trial for the bottom of College Hill, which College Hill is one of those roads that's been closed by the local electricity provider, but we've extended the trial there, speaking to parents, students and teachers. They appear happy, and talking to some of the residents, they appeared to be quite happy with the scheme, because we didn't close the road 24 hours a day. We close it at pick up and drop off and pick up times.
But will we be seeing a strategy of this cycling and walking strategy, and will this kind of strategy, I suppose, feed into the capital investment fund? I mean, would that be a place where we could see funding coming out to
Well, I think-
support more of these?
I think our priority is actually doing things. So we've introduced probably 70 new cycle spaces in St Helier this year, ranging from Demarrick Street, Charles Street, double parking at Snow Hill and Sand Street. We've got this group up and running with, as I said, the Roads Committee of St Helier, and they're going to be changing the direction of traffic on the Oxford Road cycle lane, which I think is incredibly dangerous personally. So the Roads Committee, I think, approved that last week. So there's a huge amount of work going on. We're working with the schools.
So you're saying that there's not going to be, though it was in the business plan, there's not going to be a strategy. It's more about ad hoc places where
Well, I think
we
that-
see that there needs to be, but without this kind of wider look.
We've
into
got,
walking and cycling strategy.
we've been working across, desperate to do something in the East of the Island from Gorey to St Saviour's, but we're liaising with the parish roads committees in those two areas. So I think we know what we're trying to achieve, and it's about trying to deliver some of these things.
And I say, will these sit within actually, achieving these things? A lot of the time it's related to money. So would this be part of the capital investment?
I think you're absolutely right that some needs investment, but there are some very quick wins, in my opinion, where you don't need to spend a lot of money on capital investment. You need to just make some slight tweaks, and we're trying to get some quick wins. We clearly have invested capital in providing additional covered cycle shelters in St Helier. But the work goes on. Anything you want to add, Tris?
You may have seen the plan for the Bagatelle Road, which is a significant schools cluster. So there's a new crossing gone in there at JCG. That's got 200 pedestrians crossing in an afternoon up there, so that's very successful. And we've got the resurfacing of that road coming up. So in conjunction with that, we've got other pedestrian improvements that will be created down there at the top of Laverine.
Thank you. And we talked about the number 10 and the fact it was using the Climate Emergency Fund to help kind of start up this trial. Is there going to be other additional bus routes using the Climate Emergency Fund? Is there plan to do more?
And I think what's interesting is we've seen 60% increase on the hopper buses since we've been in post. We've added 3 new stops to that route, and we're trying to encourage people, not only St Helier residents, but people who don't live in St Helier, to use through tickets. So if you're coming in from Trinity, St John, St Mary, you can come in on the 4, the 5 or the 7 and jump onto the hopper bus, and it'll take you to Springfield, it'll take you to the waterfront, it'll take you near the hospital, takes you all over the place. So we're really working hard to promote that. I think in general, the buses serve the island reasonably well. There are areas which don't get service, and we heard this morning on the radio about Plemel. And, we don't go to places like Flickay or Noirmont or Wayne. There are a whole range of areas that we don't go to, and the reason we don't go to is there's not the demand, and it is about trying to get the best service we can with the resources we have.
Thank you. And there was introduction about the school travel safety schemes, and we talked a little bit just now about some introduction changes around College Hill and above as well. But last hearing you talked about the road safety schemes such as Samaray and Lineary were progressing slower than hoped. What caused the delay? Is this?
So that is an area where we need to acquire some land, and those discussions are ongoing, unfortunately. There are junctions which aren't suitable to encourage active travel through, and therefore you've got to make some adjustments. And if we don't own the land, then you've got to try and acquire the land. And so those discussions are ongoing. I met recently with representatives from the area, and we're all keen to try and find solutions We have improved that area with improved signage, but there is more that we can do, we want to do, but it is about finding people that are willing to work with you rather than not sell their land.
These things always seem from the outside to progress very slowly, but it's important to remember that, the difference we have made over the very recent. So we now have a path from basically the parish hall in St Clement's all the way through to Liscay, or a route with off-road path sections. So it's just chipping away with them, and discussions are progressing positively with the landowner at the moment.
You can't compulsory purchase.
It's not a route we've ever gone down for these type of things. We've always tried to work with landowners and with developers.
And a lot of these road safety schemes have been talked about being pilots. Are we seeing them becoming permanent fixtures? Will they be permanent fixtures? In a way, I'm saying, before the political term is out, are we going to see that these become permanent, and so that we don't see them being potentially dropped in the next government?
Well, I think things like the school street at St Luke's, that's a permanent fixture. We've made that permanent. I think in terms of introducing schemes, there's a mechanism which is called a 68, is that what you call it?
Article 68.
Article 68, which makes it easier to introduce something on a temporary basis than introduce something on a permanent basis. And so I think the Article 68 is often used to try and speed up the process. We're really keen to do something at the junction on the railway walk at the top of La Plante Hill. But again, we've got to liaise with landowners. When I visited the site, there were young people who just got off the bus, and it's very dangerous for people to walk in that area and many areas of the island. And we are doing our best with the resource we have to achieve what we can in the time we've got.
And I think, Jim, my last question on this, which is something we've talked a little bit about range of individual schemes, and I think you've touched on this as well. But stepping back, do you think Jersey's made progress on delivering a sustainable transport system? And what do you think the biggest barriers
do
are?
I believe we've made
Active,
progress? I would
yeah.
say yes. Do I believe we could do more? Absolutely. It's a challenge because of the fact we've got 13 highway authorities. I can identify roads which would really benefit from the same treatment as Rue de Maupertuis, where they become no-through roads and the priority is given to walkers and cyclists and people have access to premises. But you have to persuade the roads committees of those parishes to agree with you. We have one road where we had a representative who uses the road and they thought it was a great idea, but it should be open between 7 and 9 for traffic. We were trying to get children to and from school, so it's not as easy as it looks from the outside, I have to say. It's very, very frustrating. And there are some areas we could make significant differences to with very little in the way of investment. But you've got to take the community with you and those people elected in the areas. So the roads committees, 13 highway authorities, we have to work with the other 12.
Thank you, Minister. I'd hand over
Yes,
to Councillor
change the
Sea.
subject to
Yeah.
sea defences, if I may. The consultation on the Havre de Parc coastal flood alleviation scheme has now closed. Are there any details you can as to feedback which you can now share with us?
Well, I think the feedback is generally supportive of the scheme. I think over 100 people attended the events with 128 questionnaires completed, and as soon as those are amalgamated and put into a report, we'll be sharing that with the public. We added drop-in sessions at both the Town Hall, St Saviour's Parish Hall and St Clement's Parish Hall due to requests for additional sessions. It's a significant scheme. We've got some neighbours who don't like the idea of a footpath being near them, because at the moment they've got a beach which is lower than them, and if you raise a footpath then people will be in line. I think the designs that I've seen have been very sympathetic to that challenge. and I think I said earlier, I pay huge tribute to the officers involved in the work. And in general, the community is engaged. We've got to consider some geological sites. We've got historical sites. So there are challenges. But, you know, the last slide on the presentation I keep seeing says, "Time and tide wait for no man."
In terms of engagement, did this include businesses, or did businesses come forward with
Yeah,
views?
absolutely. I think you know, we've held events down at Hov Depart for residents and businesses alike, and you know, we're really keen to hear from businesses. And you know, we heard earlier about the impact on businesses when we close a road. If a business gets flooded, they're not able to trade generally.
I think also we were talking earlier about the plan for town and rejuvenating town. Well, that's, you know, town's seafront. It's certainly the most sheltered part where you could get sunburnt in February on a good day. And I think it creates significant opportunity for business down there, to be honest with you.
Okay, and now that the consultation has ended, can you give us an indicative timetable about taking things forward?
Well, it's a huge amount of work that has to be done and has been done. So there's modelling that's been done. They've got to test models in tanks to ensure that that's appropriate, and we need to do that before we submit plans, because the plans we submit need to be the ones we want to take forward. So in terms of timing, I don't think that a planning application will go in until probably Q4 2027.
Okay, and in terms of funding, then it's not within the present budget, or is it?
So there's funding in the budget to continue doing works, because it's it is.
Continue doing which work? The work as to what needs to be done, or
So we've got officers working on this, and again, it's an area where we have to use some external resource because there are specialists in this type of modelling, which we have to go out and work with. So we're probably 12 months behind where we would like to be, but yeah, there is monies in the fund.
Yeah, there's monies under the feasibility head of expenditure for the initial planning vote, and then in 2029 there's 10 million assigned to shoreline management Hov Depart. That's the start of a much larger programme.
so nothing committed to actual work per se at the moment.
Well, 2029 there's 10 million.
Building work, I meant, rather than
Yeah.
Okay. And yes, and just again going back to our earlier conversation about investing in Jersey, how will the Hov Depart scheme or any other major sea defence scheme impact on that? Will the funds come out of investing in Jersey, or where?
Well, I think that's the detail we've got to finalise, but clearly it's a major investment for the island, and so how it's funded is going to be key, isn't it? We've, you know, I don't know if you've seen the maps that identify if we had worst case scenario. It's quite striking. So, you know, these things, I'm not sure that we do, we understand the extent of it, and we've got to make sure that the funding is in there, whichever bucket it's coming out of, it's got to be there.
But wouldn't it make sense that it's in the capital investment fund, because it is a key
I
investment?
think it is mentioned in that document, but it's about, does all of the funding come from there? How's it funded? And that's
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? that
So
we
as
have.
John's alluded to, there's £10 million identified in 2029 in the budget process, and hopefully there'll be more funds in the investment plan.
I think we still have to understand exactly what the capital investment fund is going to do for us at this point. What we do know is we've got some long-term capital plans that have been developed, which cover sort of up to 2040 plus.
Yeah.
2050 actually, sorry, 25-year capital plans. How those feed in and what the funding mechanism are for all of those plans, because, you know, the ask is considerable and not everything will get funded. But quite what appears on the list and when is sort of some of the detail that we haven't
Because
got
that's where you would think exactly where the capital investment fund would be going, would be, a future energy, a waste facility, or the, big infrastructure changes around the shoreline management plan. These are big chunks of money that you
Yes.
need to have that long term. You were talking
Yeah.
about that long term sustainability and needing a long term lead in time. That these are the
And
things that you
we've
need.
provided all of that information, so that information's available.
Right, yeah, changing tack slightly. In our last hearing, you affirmed that the inert waste mound at La Collette is intended for use in shoreline management projects. Are you pleased to advise what cost offset you expect from using this material, and what preparations are being made to properly assess both the cost savings and the available capacity?
I don't have that detail in front of me. The shoreline management plan, it runs into hundreds, tens of millions of pounds, over £100 million, and I don't know how that's apportioned. But it makes sense for us to use resource that we've got available to us before we think about having to import any resource to do the works.
We don't have that in our pack here, those
Okay.
figures, but basically that is factored in. So the value of the fill material to advance the line, and then the capacity that provides to prolong the life of Collette is all factored in.
But Minister, you mentioned earlier that when we were talking about that 3 million, the shortfall from the waste is that maybe there will be, because there is that drop in waste, construction waste, for example, that we'll need to import to actually infill the advancing line. Do you think that is that something?
I think so when we're talking about Halfday Park, I don't think that factors in. If you look about advancing the line elsewhere, then you'd have to start thinking about that. Obviously, we've got quite a lot of waste at the Collette, and so you would be effectively just prolonging the life of that site.
Okay, I understand.
Yes, so it's a very, very general questions really now. On the basis it is your department's area, what assessment has been made as to how construction of new sea defences might alter sea currents and coastal processes?
Well, huge, and the modelling goes from right from the English Channel down to how far south does it go?
Oh, it covers the Bay of Saint Michel, although it's a Bay of some. Based on what?
So what?
It covers the bay, and we're also reaching out to colleagues in France to understand what they're doing as well, through the bureau, the office in Normandy. But in terms of local coastal processes, that's part of the modelling that the Minister was talking about. So we've got a high-level model which does the storm, wave climate and the flows of water, and then there'll be much more local models created.
So what they do is they check the model and they look at images from storms that we've had, and then they're able to measure the model against the actuals. It's really, I forget the company we work with. What's that called? Who are they called?
We're working with ACOM at the moment.
ACOM, yeah.
And then we'll actually create a physical model and where that's to be hosted.
And is that impacting on that Ramsar site as well, so that it all fits that in and how it
all
would
that's included. So you start off with the computer models, which is the large scale models we've talked about, and then for the works themselves and for that area, there will be a physical model in a wave tank.
Okay, thank you. Maybe 51.
Okay, yeah, yes, right. Well, a quick question. Progress on the catchment flood management plan. Is the department confident that current priorities and resourcing are sufficient to meet identified risks?
Well, there's work, ongoing work. We've made improvements. We've got further work to do, I think we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I think we are reasonably confident, but not complacent. Would be my
Thank you, Mr. Wood. The last section.
Sure.
which
Yeah,
is
carry on.
over to
Yeah, sure.
Deputy
No
Warden.
problem at all. So this waste strategy, we've got a series of questions here. So the vape ban is now in effect. How will you measure the impact of this policy on waste reduction and other product bans or restrictions under consideration?
We know the levels of vapes that we currently export for recycling. We don't capture all vapes. Clearly, there's some in hedgerows and wherever at the moment. So, in terms of measuring that, I would imagine we will see a decline in the amount of vapes that are exported. But I'd need to ask the officer involved for more detail on that. In terms of other areas, my colleague, the Environment Minister, was recently at a BIC meeting, and one of the areas looking at is the scheme that's introduced in Ireland, which is around giving money for returns on plastic bottles. And I think that is an area that we should look at as an island, but I'm not sure about the resource implications on that. But the feedback I've read from where it has been introduced has been very positive. Yeah.
Sorry, David, you going to ask a question? No, you weren't going to ask a question. No, it's fine. You previously said a light solid waste strategy would be completed by the end of 2025. Will this be published before the end of your term, and how will it shape the work of your successor?
I certainly hope it will be published before the end of the term. There's a lot of work which goes into formulating that, and clearly the officers will remain the same regardless of who the minister is, and the advice I'd suggest would remain the same unless something changes towards that advice. So yes, I'd like to consider that the waste strategy will be there for 10 years.
Okay, thank you. So what progress has been made on the Bridging Liquid Waste strategy? Which projects are on track and which have been delayed or rescoped? And just a reminder, in the panel's 2024 review of the Bridging Island Waste strategy, we recommended and you accepted that an integrated water management plan should be developed or would be developed by the end of 2025. Has that commitment been met?
There's a huge amount of work being done around that. I don't think we are going to meet the end of the year. But I have to say, we have worked very hard, the department's worked very hard to ensure that the liquid waste plan is in place and can be delivered. And part of the budget process has involved some really tough discussions to ensure that we are able to deliver. The work that goes on, which unfortunately causes roadworks and disruption, we've done a lot of work to separate surface water from sewage to ensure that we've got additional capacity for sewage in a lot of areas. And I suppose one of the biggest jobs recently was going underneath Victoria Avenue to do that work earlier this year. Yes, we're confident that we're going to deliver the projects to the timescales that we've set.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Changing subject again slightly. So the JEP reported on Monday that conversations had already started regarding an anaerobic digestion plant at La Colette. Minister, can you confirm whether discussions are underway and outline what stage they have reached?
Well, I've had no discussion with Ireland Energy on that subject.
Right.
I am aware that we generate power at Ballazan from the gases we generate at Ballazan, which is probably almost powers the entire site there. It's probably worth close to £500,000 worth of energy, I should think. And we also generate energy from waste plant currently, but I personally have had no discussions with Ireland Energy on that subject.
Mm-hmm.
Is there space at La Colette, that area, that would be able to house such a, if those discussions were successful, is there an area?
I have to apologise, we've got no idea how much space would be needed, so I couldn't answer that positively or negatively. Yeah.
So the energy recovery facility is expected to reach the end of its life by 2036, with replacement costs estimated around 250 million. Do you accept 2035 as the deadline? And in light of external criticism, the government is underestimating the urgency. Can you confirm that preparatory work is underway?
Well, I think work is always underway in terms of our assets. So we're continually reviewing how we use our assets and how we maintain our assets, and therefore the lifespan of those assets. I've every confidence in the team in the department that we're on top of that. My recent visit to Guernsey at the start of this year, they don't have an energy from waste plant. They export the waste that they generate, and so we would have to make a decision whether we wanted to repeat what we currently do or change what we do. And
But those discussions are currently taking place at the moment.
well, the discussions, as I said, I have every confidence that the team are working hard in terms of ensuring that the lifespan of our existing facility will be as long as possible. I will write to you with the current timelines, but I don't.
Thank you. And obviously the cost and also the replacement cost, because 250 million is a lot of money. And again, we come back to that capital investment fund I mentioned earlier, in the sense of trying to work out what goes in that and what doesn't. And it was something that wasn't mentioned when there was Invest in Jersey.
Yeah.
It's not mentioned in there, and it's just wondering, well, if it's not mentioned in there, but it's a huge amount, that is a big capital outlay that will have to be budgeted for, and where does that sit if you've got all the money that from capital projects going into a capital investment fund, but then this is something needs to be planned for and it's not be mentioned.
We have, I don't know if you've been to the Energy from Waste plant. It's a fantastic facility, and I will get you an update on its expected lifespan as in the next week or so.
And maybe the costs as well, and how that is all seen within
We'll get an update.
within the flow of the future. Thank you.
Do you want to carry on with your next questions?
Yes, fantastic. Thank you. So there has been just maybe focus a little bit on speed limit changes, because there's been a number of speed limit changes, and in Trinity, St Peter and St Brellards, for example, we saw over the summer some ministerial orders coming through for those different changes. Can you, the Minister, explain a little bit more about the rationale behind those changes, and provide an update on the implementation of these orders, and if there are more coming, and how does that work, basically?
Well, it's a process that started in 2016 with the then Minister and the Committee de Connotab, and they've worked their way around the island. And it's interesting that there's a meeting in Grouville tomorrow night, I think it is, to discuss speed limits in Grouville, because they were the first parish, or one of the first parishes, I beg your pardon, the second parish, to go through the process, and that was completed in March 2019. I think there's been a significant change in opinion since 2019 within the Grouville community, and so we're expecting requests from the parish to change a number of speed limits.
Do you mean to go to reduce even further or to increase?
I don't think they reduced very many in 2019 in Grouville. But I do think they've got some that they've identified, and we've certainly identified areas which would be better suited with a lower speed limit to enable cycling to be more welcoming pastime. So they've got dialogue going on. We're currently in the process, I think with St Wan's, we're in the process with them, and then we're due to start again with St Martin's. So it is a long process. I know in St John's it probably took 4 years to go through, and people have forgotten what they've said when they start the consultation, because I had people who were very much in favour of reducing speeds who then changed their mind. So it is a long process, and done well, it's really good. Done badly, it's difficult. Speed is a very it's one of the top 5 in terms of our collision reduction plan. Is a big issue, speed in Jersey, and we hopefully at long last will be assisted by some technology in the near future. We've also recruited recently to a road safety officer, I'm not sure of the title, road safety officer, to help us with training and education. I'm delighted that the roads, the tyre charity, Tyre Safety, are coming back to the island, and we're doing some work in October with the Jersey Rally on the good, the bad and the ugly, and that's different tyres. And then later in October, we will be monitoring tyres again in some local car parks, which we did last year. And so there's a huge amount of work done on that. But in terms of the speed, it is one of the key things. And yeah.
So, Minister, it's not just, I mean, obviously we can have speed limits, but if people don't stick to the speed limits, and unfortunately we had in the last States sitting a number of States members who questioned...
Quite shocking, I thought, some of the comments made in the States.
Yes, I also was very shocked to hear that there was little regard to actual speed limits, and wondering what work you're doing with honorees and with the police to kind of also encourage, there's the stick and the carrot, but also encouraging more.
I can only talk of my experience in my jurisdiction, because the Home Affairs Minister has the responsibility for the policing of roads. So whilst we're responsible for the creating the legislation, it is the Home Affairs Minister who has the responsibility for the policing. I'm aware that we see visitors to the parish hall regularly, and in our accounts we show how much has been collected in fines, and I would love to see that figure as zero, but clearly we collect too much in fines because too many people are
Do you
speeding.
think the fine should be increased to try to deter further, so that speed limits are actually adhered to?
That may be a deterrent, and I'm sure we've all driven over the speed limit, and I relaxed about 1 and 2 miles over the speed limit. It's the people that have no regard for speed limits, and you know, we have a problem right across the island with people driving far too fast on our roads, and we see far too many fatalities on our roads and serious injuries caused by speed. And so anything that I or the Home Affairs Minister can do to reduce that, we're happy to do.
Sorry, we go. I mean, Samaria had its own speed exchange fairly recently as party to that, and yes, after a long process about reducing speed, it's perhaps I take the opportunity to say it would be helpful if we had more speed cameras, which are quite a big expense. So I'm wondering if that could be taken on board either by yourself or the Home Affairs Minister.
Well, currently, there are no speed cameras in Jersey.
Well, not speed.
Handheld.
The signs, smiley signs.
Cameras to record the speed, shall I say? Because if you're going to an area where you're told you're going at 40 miles an hour when it should only be 30, that actually does encourage people to slow down, and it's that sort of recognition of speed.
The smileys?
We seed funded the smile, they're called SIDS, smiling SIDS, speed indication devices, but now it's down to the parishes to fund them. We don't have a budget for them, but there was a fund back in the day that we are able to avail ourselves of to provide the initial run of them, but that doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, I'm saying we I won't go to the secrets, but we don't have enough in our parish to help.
The good thing about the SIDS is they don't record the registration of the vehicle, but they identify the times and speed of vehicles that are going through, so you can then do your enforcement based around the intelligence you gather from those.
Yes, and also it immediately does impact on the driver concerned. They don't know they're going at that speed.
It certainly does. And we have other people in our community who think we've got too many signs and don't want signs. So it's always a question of balance. But, I actively support things like the Jersey Rally, the Motorcourse and the Kart Club to enable people to have a go at speed doing their favoured motorsport. And that's why I get incredibly frustrated when people race through St John's when we do so much for motorsport. It really annoys me.
Thank you, Minister. And just maybe moving to the last subject in our last few minutes is that at the last hearing you explained that PFAS management at the Colette containment cells and Bedazan sewage treatment works would be guided by the recommendations of the PFAS expert panel's third report. And this is now being published. Can you explain how you will be responding to its recommendations and what changes are now being planned at the Colette and Belazan as a result of this?
It's a subject which I think is on our agenda tomorrow, so perhaps we'll write to you with a response.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and that maybe means that there's any other.
It's fine. I mean, I guess one final one, which is on our depart, we obviously have an ongoing discussion with the charity, or potential charity or whatever to take over. How do you feel things are progressing on that front?
Well, very slowly. I think the deadline is later this week.
Yeah.
I think it's, I understand that it's against the law to describe an organisation as a charity if they're not a charity.
Okay.
I'm hopeful that we can get things resolved for Friday, but I'm not involved in the process, and I've purposely stayed out of the process. And I'm hoping I'm going to get an update on Friday with a result.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Minister, for taking the time today to answer our questions. There's a number of areas that we'd follow up with you on that, and thank you, officers, also for your input.
Thank you. Thank you all.